This is why you shouldn't believe everything you see on social media. By watching this video, you'd probably think that this is a cute, happy couple, right? Well, what if I told you that this TikTok star by the name of Jin Kid is now accused of killing his wife and her friend? Ali Abulaban was known for portraying Al Pacino's Tony Montana from Scarface on his TikTok account. He was growing really quick and things were going great for him and his family, until this happened. After Ali, his wife Anna, and their 5-year-old daughter decided to move from Virginia to San Diego, things started to take a turn for the worst. Ali started becoming really violent towards Anna, and she was planning on filing a restraining order against him. They were in the process of separating, and she was living in their luxury San Diego apartment. On the morning of October 21st, Ali sneaks into the apartment, vandalizes it, and then puts an app on his daughter's iPad, which allowed him to monitor any live audio that was going on in the apartment. That same day, he hears Anna and her friend Rayburn Barron laughing in their apartment. He rushed to the apartment and took both of their lives.
Just imagine showing up to your own, right? Well, things ended up taking a turn for the worse whenever Koala began to suspect that Noella might be cheating on him.
Have you guys heard about this crazy incest case between father and daughter? In 1995, 20-year-old Stephen Plato met 15-year-old Alyssa Gracia, and they both ended up having a child, a baby girl named Denise. When they had Denise, they began to struggle financially, and Alyssa also noticed that Stephen began physically abusing their daughter. So she decided that it would be best that they give her up for adoption. In 2016, Denise is all grown up. She's 18 years old, and now her name is Katie. She decided that she wanted to locate her biological parents, Stephen and Alyssa, and she actually began to live with them. When Katie moved in with her biological parents, Alyssa noticed that Stephen started acting very different, and also he began to dress a lot better, and she just thought it was really weird. In 2017, Katie got pregnant, and guess who the father was? Her own father. 2 months after Stephen and Alyssa's divorce was finalized, Katie and Stephen got married. When they gave birth to their baby boy, they were then arrested and were charged for incest, and later on they were set free on bond. In 2018, Katie began to see a different side of Stephen, so she decided to end the relationship. What happened after is devastating. Stephen took their newborn baby, he suffocated him and then put him in a closet, and then he shot and killed Katie and her adoptive dad, and then he turned the gun on himself.
This video shows Kayla Brown chained up in the slave storage container of Todd Kohlhepp, the Amazon review killer. Between 2003 and 2016, he murdered at least 7 people in South Carolina, dropping several clues along the way. He left several reviews on Amazon products that he used in the killings, like this one that reads, "Keep in your car when you have to hide the bodies and left the full-size shovel at home." In 2016, Kayla and her boyfriend Charles went missing after they went to clean Todd's residence. No one heard from them for months until a post was made to Charles' Facebook page saying that he and Kayla were expecting a baby. Shortly after, an old photo of the couple was posted with the caption, "We are fine." This raised suspicions, leading police to trace these posts to a storage unit on Todd's property. There, they freed Kayla and took Todd into custody, where he bragged about burying several bodies on the property as well, including Kayla's boyfriend. He was given 7 life sentences, 1 for each of his murders, despite him confessing to many, many more.
By looking at this picture, you probably would think that this is somebody's cute grandma, right? Well, what if I told you that this sweet-looking elderly woman was actually a serial killer? I'm not joking either. They literally found 7 bodies buried in her own backyard. This is the story of Dorothea Puente, and I advise you not to watch this at night because it's a creepy one. People who knew Dorothea thought she was such a sweet lady, and they loved her stories. But most of her stories were lies that she would make up along the way. She ran a boarding house in Sacramento, California, and would take care of tenants that were disabled or just needed extra help. and most of them being elderly. And nobody thought anything strange was going on until a tenant went missing. So investigators decide to show up at the house and ask some questions. And another tenant secretly slips them a paper. The tenant basically tells them, like, you guys need to check the backyard. Something weird is going on. There's a shovel and stuff. And they were shocked at what they found. Hide your social security checks because we're talking about how this old cute little lady killed for them. This is part 2 of the Dorothea Puente story and how she became Sacramento's notorious serial killer at the age of 60. After 7 bodies were discovered in the backyard of her boarding home, investigators soon believed that she might have been responsible for up to 25 deaths. One of them being her ex-boyfriend. And another victim of hers was a man that she asked to dig up the holes so she could throw her trash in. And her neighbors thought she was a saint because she would take these people into her boarding home and take care of them. But the Miss Doubtfire lookalike was actually poisoning all of her victims, stealing their social security checks, and then burying their bodies in her backyard. But the real question is, do you think she did this all alone or was somebody helping her? If you don't know the story behind this photo, it's a crazy one. This is the case of Elizabeth Smart and how she was kidnapped at 14 years old. On June 5th, 2002, a man tears open a screen window of this home. And while everybody was asleep, he quietly makes his way upstairs and only wakes up Elizabeth, kidnapping her from her room while her sister saw everything. That's when her sister Mary Catherine, who was only 8 years old, made her way down the hallway quietly and told her parents what had just happened. By the time they woke up and checked the whole house, this evil man had already abducted their daughter and was gone. This is part 2 of the Elizabeth Smart case and how she survived her abduction at only 14. So Brian David Mitchell was actually a handyman for the Smart house. Both him and his wife Wanda Barzee held her in captive for 9 months until she was finally found. They were hiding in these woods in Utah where David and Wanda would torture and starve her. She would also be shackled to trees and wouldn't be able to escape, but she did whatever she could to survive. Now the craziest part is that they would go out in public, but nobody recognized her until this happened. Investigators released this sketch of him and a woman on the street recognized him. She called authorities and an officer recognized Elizabeth. She was disguised in a gray wig and a scarf, so they had to ask her a few questions just to make sure it was her. David was sentenced to life in prison for her abduction, but his wife, on the other hand, was released in 2018.
Did you know that there was an 11-year-old serial killer in the 1960s? Her name was Mary Bell, and this is her story. Mary was born in 1957 in England. Her mother, Betty, was a sex worker, and she made it very obvious that she did not want Mary. She tried to kill her multiple times, pawn her off to other people, and in her trade of sex work, her specialty was BDSM, bondage, whippings, chokings, that whole thing. And she would even sexually abuse Mary in front of her clients for more money. Mary's stepfather, on the other hand, was a violent criminal, and he was also an alcoholic. You can begin to understand and see the pieces add up, especially when you factor in nature versus nurture. Unfortunately, Mary didn't have a fighting chance to be a normal kid. She never had a normal childhood, which makes this story fully disturbing and tragic. Mary grew up in Scotswood, which was a very impoverished area. There was a constant police presence. But the weirdest part of this whole thing is that the parents in the neighborhood would just let their kids stay out and play until all hours of the night. I mean, some kids would be out doing whatever until midnight. So they were just fully unsupervised. Mary didn't really have any friends. She was very isolated, and one of the girls that she used to hang out with was actually hit by a bus and killed in front of Mary while they were playing in the street. So on top of all of this other trauma she's facing, she has to watch a kid that she knows get killed. This story just really, But the fact of the matter is that kids were scared of Mary. She had a temper, and her attitude and mood could change on just like the flip of a coin. And she was known to punch, hit, scream, even choke kids on occasion. And it wasn't until Mary met Norma that things really got bad. Mary Bell was an 11-year-old serial killer, and one could argue that she became this way because she was a victim of sexual and physical abuse. Mary's behavior really worsened when she became friends with Norma Bell. No, they were not related. It was just a common last name at that time in England. Mary was the leader, and Norma was described as not being as smart as Mary, or even at the time described as simple, which is very derogatory, and I don't like that. They were a tag team, and they would assault children in the neighborhood together. Let's talk about the timeline leading up to the arrest of Mary and Norma Bell. On May 11th of 1967, Mary was 10, Norma was 12. They took a 3-year-old boy named John to get some sweets. An hour later, they carried John into a pub, and John was profusely bleeding from his head. They claimed that they found him. When the ambulance was called and arrived, it came out that John had fallen off of a ledge, although Mary later admitted that she had pushed him. The next day, on May 12th, 3 little girls were playing in the Woodlands Crescent daycare sandbox. Mary and Norma approached them, and Mary began to choke one of the girls and then the other. She would choke them and then shove sand down their throats. After almost killing the 2 other girls, Mary approached the third and said, "What happens when you choke someone? Do they die?" with a very disturbing smile on her face, and then proceeded to choke her until she turned purple. May 25th, Martin Brown was 4 years old. He went to his aunt's house to ask for money to buy a lollipop from Dixon's, the local store, and he got his lollipop. That was the last time he was seen alive. He was found by boys in an abandoned house with his arms outstretched and blood and saliva coming out of his mouth. When the ambulance got there, he was already deceased, although no homicide investigation was opened because the coroners couldn't find a cause of death. Mary would then visit Martin's mother over the next several weeks and ask her how she was doing and give her this really creepy smile and giggle every time Mrs. Brown seemed upset. It wasn't until she asked to see Martin in his coffin that she was kicked out and had the door slammed on her face. It was very disturbing and odd.